Good evening. I'm Gord Martineau. We want to be with you in a very special way tonight to celebrate the life of Mark Dailey, a beloved City TV co-worker and quite simply a Toronto News legend. Many of you know that Mark had been battling cancer. Today, we lost him to cancer. Our thoughts and prayers with his wife Kim, his daughter Nicole, son-in-law Matt, sisters Colleen and Kathy, and his parents John and Rose Marie back in Ohio. Mark was only 57, a cruelly young age for anyone to be taken. As you can imagine, his death has hit us at City TV and Rogers very hard. But we also know that Mark touched the lives of many of you over the years, and we invite you now to join us in remembering Mark's very special qualities and in honoring his most remarkable career.
Good afternoon. I'm Mark Dailey, live from our new home on Queen Street West, making news this hour.
To City News viewers, he was the voice.
This is City TV, everywhere.
To our City TV family, Mark Dailey was colleague, friend, brother, a rock of the newsroom, and quite simply, one of a kind. Born in Youngstown, Ohio on August 1st, 1953, Mark was a born broadcaster, if ever there was one. A wunderkind blessed with a commanding voice and uncommon news savvy. Mark developed the crisp delivery and witty, gutsy writing style that would become his trademark.
City Pulse News.
In 1979, after a stint at Chum Radio, Mark arrived at City TV, a lanky, streetwise rookie reporter who fit right in with the station's groundbreaking approach to news gathering.
I think there's a spirit and a drive here I've never seen before. People striving for individual goals as well as collective goals, what we're trying to do. And I think you have very unique personalities all together doing that. No matter how rough things get and how bad things get, the product is still there, and I think the product is very consistent. And it's different than what anybody else in town is doing. I think we feel closer to the people. I think the people feel closer to us.
Back then, the glasses technology was a little different, so I had these things, I used to call them bus windshields. I had these big, thick glasses, and I was a really skinny guy, skinnier than I am now back then. I think I've gotten better looking as I got older. If you look at my high school pictures, I was a real geek, and I was still about a half a geek when I got here.
Mark Dailey, the City Pulse. The young lad was able to tell police that he came to the Queen Street Mental Health Center here at Queen and Ossington.
It didn't take Mark long to find his niche on the police beat, quickly earning the respect of news colleagues and forging lifelong friendships with many in the law enforcement community, from beat cops to police chiefs.
Through our own investigation, we know that the motive had something to do with the dispute with one of the tenants of this building. The 19-year-old victim got off the Markham Road bus here at Markham and Brimmorton, just south of Ellesmere.
Mark's nickname was the Inspector, a moniker he always wore with pride. At countless crime scenes, there was Mark, sporting his omnipresent fedora.
There was quite a bit of blood at the scene, and they've admitted there is a man believed to be middle-aged with serious head injuries. There's been some evidence that this could have been some kind of tragic drug misadventure. This woman was well known to police in the area.
One tragedy in particular haunted him even years later, the fatal shooting in 1980 of Constable Michael Sweet. Mark Dailey, first reporter on the scene.
The story that sticks in my mind the most it was the Michael Sweet shooting. He was a police officer who was killed during a robbery in progress. One of the few times I sat and watched my story on the news that night and started to cry, because it just so much of it was wrong and it didn't have to happen, and this young father of three didn't have to die.
No question, Mark was our go-to guy for the big stories. And we begin live with Mark Dailey in storm-battered York region. Mark?
Well, Gordon, whole communities were ravaged, homes damaged, power outages everywhere. The GTA won't soon forget this evening.
No one was better giving live breaking news, gathering the facts in a snap and giving them to you straight, unflappable on the fly.
Breaking news from the streets tonight. One man fighting for his life in hospital after a home invasion stabbing in the East End. Good evening.
Mark was equally brilliant in his other big role as the longtime anchor of our late-night news, showcasing his unparalleled presentation skills and frequently his quirky sense of humor, both on the air and behind the scenes.
They're shooting some B-roll up here, dancing earlier.
Stay with City TV as we take you away from all this regular programming stuff to show you what television really can be.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was reading the wrong copy. Late great movies are next.
The voice of City TV was sort of born in 1983. So whoever was doing it at the time was going on vacation. They said, you know, Mark, do you want to do it? And I was really busy. I was working 12 hours on the crime beat. I just treated it as just made fun of the shows and, you know, made fun of the people and just my sort of mock heroic, insulting, witty humor that still exists, I guess. Just figuring, you know, like, they aren't going to want me to do this for too long.
You're about to enter the vast world of late great movies. Big deal, right? Tonight we're repeating a movie we had on about a month ago because we feel like it, and I like it.
The other guy never came back from holidays, and I've been doing it ever since.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Mark endeared himself to Toronto in many other ways. Always approachable and deeply generous, he unselfishly threw his solid professional reputation and respected name behind many charities and worthy causes.
It's great to do what we do in our business because we meet people and we can use our profile to make good things happen for good people and good organizations.
Giving his time without hesitation.
Very honored to introduce Mark Dailey to accept our local hero award.
And accepting accolades with gratitude and humility.
It's really by the grace and the good deeds of the men and women of the Toronto Police Service that some of my best years and my best deeds happen. And I just want to thank you very much for everything you've done for me and with me. And I'm still working, so we ain't done yet. Thank you very much.
Members of this club started this. This is the 5th annual. They've raised more than $350,000 for Prostate Cancer Canada. So you know why I'm here.
That's the mark I know. Another day of fine Sunnybrook Cancer Center fashion.
And Mark bravely shared with Toronto some of his most personal struggles in 2004, chronicling his own battle against prostate cancer.
There is a place for a sense of humor in all of this, but when I walked out of my urologist's office here on the Danforth on that day, I wasn't laughing. Quite upset, actually. He spent a lot of time with me explaining the options, gave me this book, told me to read it, come back with all of my questions in about 2 weeks. It was the beginning of a very confusing and emotional ride.
We'll never know how many lives Mark may have saved with his series of stories on City News and his constant message for all men to take care of their own health with regular checkups.
1 in 8 will be diagnosed with prostate cancer in his lifetime. That means at least one of you at each table will get the bad news someday.
Mark beat prostate cancer. Then last September, he announced he was facing another challenge.
I'd been having symptoms, weight loss, which the viewers noticed. A lot of them wrote in and wanted my weight loss, recipes or anything like that. And I was having some fatigue and some night sweats. Those symptoms fit into like 20 different things. So my doctor started testing, eliminating, over a couple of weeks. In the 3rd week, we finally got CT scan, CAT scan done, and they found a tumor on my kidney, on my left kidney. And it's been there probably for a little while. The problem with kidney cancer is until you get symptoms, which could be for 20 other things, it's there, probably been there for a while. It's hard to detect unless you have a CT scan. So it's yet another cancer challenge for me. I'm going to see you in a few weeks down the road after my medical adventures. It's time to rest up. Thanks for all of your well-wishers. We'll be in touch on City News in the next little while.
Mark fought hard, but the cancer spread. We'll always remember his courage in his final days. A Toronto News legend is gone. The voice, our voice, is now silent. And what a voice he had. Versatile, powerful. When Mark Dailey spoke, he compelled and he convinced, whether as a reporter, newscaster, or our longtime City TV announcer. And Francis D'Souza found that special gift is what so many people remember when they think of our friend and colleague.
The voice.
The voice.
The big voice.
The voice.
The voice.
The voice. To his viewers and listeners, that was his most recognizable feature. But to those who knew him, Mark was so much more.
He was an institution for all of the years that I've known him, for all of my career, certainly in policing. A very honorable, ethical man who was always very, very tuned in. He was just such an honorable, decent guy.
Mark was just a terrific guy, and I don't think there's a police officer anywhere in Ontario and probably anywhere in Canada that doesn't know Mark Dailey or know of Mark Dailey, and He was a cops broadcaster. He loved policing and loved police officers, and there was just such a strong bond between him and any of the police officers that he interacted with or interviewed.
For several decades, and I've counted Mark among my friends going back very many years. He's always been almost an iconic voice in the city of Toronto and a great friend of the Toronto Police Service.
Mark had the home numbers of many police chiefs in his Rolodex. And yes, they would take his calls. That's because the brass admired his stories as a City Pulse crime specialist and the work he did to help launch Crime Stoppers back in the 80s.
That phone number, 416-222-TIPS, that very special phone number. And every time I hear that number, I just think of Mark Dailey. And I know that Mark had a passion for Crime Stoppers. He was one of the originators back in '84 when it started in Toronto.
And he was one of the original crime reporters in the city and set the bar.
I remember about 25 years ago, my boss up at CTV called me into the office and said, "We want you to be the police beat reporter." And he said the reason for that is because this guy, Mark Dailey, owns the streets. And that was the case. In 1985 and for many years, Mark Dailey, the crime specialist at City TV, literally owned the streets.
Even though Mark had a long history with police as a crime reporter, he was truly a great friend to all the emergency services, even on a personal level.
When I think about Mark when he first had cancer, and we all know that he made public much of his treatment as he went through his battle. A member of my family came down with the same kind of cancer, prostate, and Mark was the first one on the telephone to me saying, you know, give me his phone number, Bruce, I'll call him and we'll talk about it.
Remember Mark being on the scene and being interviewed by him, but certainly an individual who certainly had the history and the knowledge, and he had the ability to clearly articulate each and every story very well, and it's a loss, it's a shock.
The Waters family also in shock tonight. They used to own Chum Radio and City TV and stole Mark from the U.S.
When I first think about Mark, all I think about is what a great human being he was. There's nothing that he wouldn't do for another human being. And you know what, we can all take a great lesson from that. If we were all that way, the world would be a better place. I know that sounds pretty cliche, but he was special that way.
If you've ever walked into that newsroom at 11 o'clock at night, whether you're 2 minutes going to air or 5 minutes after the first stories aired, Mark's personality was front and center, and you heard it in his voice, but you also saw it in his friendship, and you could hear it in any story that was ever told at City TV.
Do you think your dad and him are up there chatting away and reminiscing?
I think, unfortunately for Mark's sake, my dad got there first and is probably telling them to be careful of this one.
Yeah.
Mark Dailey worked here at City TV for 31 years, so it's safe to say that in all that time he was able to touch a lot of lives. Cynthia Mulligan now with how some of you are remembering Mark Dailey.
I'm extremely upset about it. My stepfather had prostate cancer and he passed away last year, and I was rooting for Mark, and it's very sad.
I'm really sorry to hear that he's gone away. It's really tragic. It really is.
Stay with City TV as we take you away from all this regular programming stuff to show you what television really can be.
He was the beloved voice of City TV with that beautiful, deep baritone that was unmistakable. Everyone knew him by that one word, our station ID, that he made famous around the world.
Everywhere.
Of course, his voice, I mean, it was iconic, really.
His voice, very thick, hard voice, very clear voice. He's a brand name. I would say he's a trademark of City Toronto. So I'm going to miss him all. Yeah, sorry to hear that.
But viewers also saw what Mark's City TV family always knew. Behind the baritone voice was a great sense of humor with a kind heart. What do you remember about Mark Dailey?
He smiled. He was a nice man. You could tell he was a nice man. I am so sorry to hear that he's passed away. I am. He's truly going to be missed by a lot of people. All of Toronto, I would think.
One thing Torontonians always loved to do was mimic the voice. It seemed appropriate to let them do it for him today.
City TV everywhere.
City TV everywhere.
City TV everywhere.
Viewers can leave their condolences to Mark and his family on our website, citynews.ca. Cynthia Mulligan, City News.
And here's somebody who worked with Mark every night. You guys had a special chemistry, Catherine
did.
Humphreys. Yeah.
You know, he would kid me. He was like my big brother who would tease his little sister.
He used to love to needle you about stuff, didn't he?
Loved it, loved it. A lot of it I can't even say on air because what the two of us shared was a really inappropriate sense of humor. You know, stuff that you absolutely cannot say on TV, but so funny.
Very
and
funny
so
stuff.
quick-witted.
Very funny
Something
stuff.
would happen and he'd instantly have the funniest line for it.
This is the thing that I always admired about him, is that he had this inappropriate sense of humor that was so damn funny, and, you know, not stuff he could use on the air, but it really took the tension out of the newsroom. You know, he was a master at comic timing.
It did, and it wasn't mean. It was. He had the biggest, softest heart. He knew when you were feeling down about something, and he would ultimately make you laugh, because he and I had to go on TV every night and pretend that, you know, no matter what was happening in our lives, whether it was horrible or we had to go on air and do the news and the sports and have some fun.
You guys had a lot of fun together, but
did.
At the same time, what, you know, people have been asking me what I remember about him. There's so many things that I do remember, but his sense of professionalism. You know, when the guy was on the air, no problem, rock solid, right?
Shows in live television can fall apart very, very quickly, and there was nobody because I would hear it in my ear, you know, while he was doing the news and I was getting ready to do my sports. The show, something happened, technical difficulties, whatever it was, and you would never know to watch it because he just held it together. He was so rock solid, and he helped me. I learned so much from Mark Dailey. He helped me in so many ways with my career and life. He's just. He was an incredible man. Yeah, and a true original. I mean, excuse me, I remember when he came to us from Chum, and the idea at City TV was to have people who are unusual. And I remember fit the bill.
And so did you.
Thank you, Corey.
Yes. And I remember when he walked into the newsroom, I looked and I went, "Who's the beanpole?" Because, you know, 6'5", 80 pounds, with these massive glasses, a notebook, and a pen.
And you would hear the voice on the TV, you know, City News everywhere. And then when you saw him, you're like, that's the guy? The tall white guy is the guy?
Yeah. He really took the prostate cancer awareness to heart.
He did.
Raising awareness across the country for a great many people, and did it even when he wasn't feeling so good.
Absolutely, and revealing so much of his personal, you know, life on air, that's hard to do.
We got emails today from a lot of people. There's all kinds of them here, but I've got a couple I'll read. I had the opportunity to talk to him once and never forget his really charming sense of humor. It's just so sad that he's gone. You know, so typical of people's response.
He, as much as the viewers loved him, he loved the viewers. You couldn't walk, you know, at night maybe we'd walk across to go get a sandwich. Well, 3 hours later we'd be back because he would stop and talk to everyone. People just, they loved him.
He was hard to miss.
For a great reason.
I shall always remember sitting with him the night the LA riots started. He already knew then what would happen, a prelude to events that struck this city soon after. An intelligent and honorable man who shall be missed, and missed by all who met him. You see? This is how people remember Mark Dailey. Absolutely loved the little quips and comments he made during the voiceovers between shows, and especially enjoyed it whenever he would anchor the news. And I remember when he started, you know, when you phone into the TV station, well, City TV has always been a little edgy, right? So you phone in, and you got this recording, him, talking about the shows that run. Some he liked, some he didn't, and he'd tell you why.
How many times did you get a phone call at work, and people would say, "Oh, I'm sort of bummed you picked up because I was enjoying Mark Dailey's commentating while I was on hold." He was just so funny.
And he had a great relationship with everyone in the newsroom. I have never, in 31 years, heard a single human being say one bad thing about Mark Dailey.
Neither have I.
Not ever.
Neither have I. But that was him. He was so genuinely loved everybody that he worked with, and was kind to everybody, from the guy mopping the floor at night to you know, the big bosses. He was the same with everyone.
He's left a big vacuum in this newsroom,
quality.
hasn't it?
He has. Absolutely.
I mean, that sense of humor, we relied upon it. I mean, it was like you could look to Dailey to say something funny and you'd remember it and tell your friends. And,
absolutely.
Now we're not going to have that, which is really unfortunate.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate we can't say a lot of it on air.
Oh, because hilarious, huh?
Whoa.
Oh my God, some of the stuff was really funny. I mean, you know, it's amazing how sensitive people are now to television. I mean, you remember the Archie Bunker days. Everything was inappropriate.
Absolutely.
Can't do that anymore.
No.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you.
Here in the newsroom, this is a very difficult day, as you might imagine, for all of us. We love Mark Dailey as a person, and we respected his remarkable talents as a co-worker. Roger Peterson next with how our family, past and present, is holding Mark's memory in their hearts.
It's a pretty tough day for us here at City TV because Mark was quite literally the voice of City TV and City News. He was smart, he was funny, a brilliant broadcaster, and a producer's dream.
Tina Cortez may have been Mark's boss, but for years she also worked with him directly as the 11 o'clock producer.
You know, he made it easy. He was the consummate professional. He could turn it on a dime, and that's what made it great for everyone working around him.
Hello, I'm Gord Martineau. It is my sad duty to tell you at this hour that Mark Dailey has passed away.
Without a doubt, one of the most difficult news flashes Gord Martineau has ever had to do was the one today at 4. Now, he'd been on the desk for only 2 years when Mark joined our team in 1979.
My first reaction was, who's the beanpole? This tall, thin guy with the big glasses, the notebook and the pen. But, you know, it didn't take long before we realized his true value. And, you know, his value has always been there.
It's not just our current newsroom feeling this loss. Mark worked with hundreds of people, including Leafs great Jim McKenney.
When I first started out in broadcasting, Mark and I worked together. I was doing sports as a volunteer at Chum, and he was doing the news. And I couldn't believe how he could read a script. It was just like butter coming out of his mouth. You know, later on, I understood how very good he really was.
Well, Mark was best known as being the voice of City TV and the host of our 11 o'clock show. For the longest time, he was also a reporter out on the street, working with our cameramen every day, cameramen who loved and respected him.
Yeah, he actually helped me get the job. He actually tricked me into leaving a scene.
Pedro Zaquet doesn't regret getting beat to the store nearly a quarter century ago. He landed the job here in a friendship with Mark that grew stronger, especially when Pedro found himself fighting stomach cancer at the same time as Mark's first battle with cancer.
We helped each other through it, and he was actually a great help when I went through mine. And, I'm going to really miss it.
Lad was able to tell police that he came to the Queen Street Mental Health Center here at Queen and Ossington to pick up his...
Well, Mark made plenty of long-term friendships here, myself included. He was also quick to make new staff welcome. Barry Choi started working with Mark 6 years ago on The Night Show.
Like, I remember he used to drive me home every single night because I lived out the way, and he even came to my wedding just past June, you know. That was the day of the G20, but he made sure to come down because he knew it was important to me.
I think I've gotten better looking as I got older. If you look at my high school pictures, I was a real geek. And
while his professionalism is legendary and his warmth, also legendary his sense of humor and the ability to laugh at himself, including about his beloved snowblower, which he bought the year it didn't snow.
Choppy, but every time it was even going to snow a little bit, we made up this little graphic with Mark actually blowing snow. Here he is racing through blowing snow, and every time it came on the air, he absolutely loved it. He said, "Oh, where's me blowing the snow?" And we'd show it all the time. In fact, I was going to show it today on tonight's newscast.
Oh my God, I thought he was in love with that snowblower. He talked about it for weeks. I was like, can you cut it? Like, enough with the snowblower, Mark.
Good evening. A wild ride in our city, and insurance adjusters aren't going to be too happy.
Mark usually had the last word on The Late Show, but we'll let Catherine do that this time.
There was nobody you wanted to be on TV with more than him because he was so good at it, and he made you feel so calm, and he made you look better. I wouldn't be where I am without Mark Dailey.
Someone who worked in the newsroom with Mark for many years, Ontario Lieutenant Governor David Onley. Your Honor, thank you so much for being here tonight. And I know that you were very concerned about his health issues. You knew what was going on.
Yeah.
And now that he has passed, what are your reflections?
Well, first of all, my condolences to Kim and to the entire family. We were up in Sudbury earlier this afternoon when we heard the word, but I remember Mark's sense of humor. We were just talking about that in the break, and we had this routine where, of course, as the science and technology reporter, I covered all the space shuttle flights, and then it just seemed that when a plane crash occurred or something like that, Mark covered it. So our rule of thumb was, or his rule of thumb was, if it's above 35,000 feet, you cover it. If it's below 35, I cover it.
You know, just an irreverent and sometimes inappropriate sense of humor, but totally appropriate for a newsroom.
Yes.
Because newsrooms, you know, are dark places sometimes.
Yeah, you have to cope with an awful lot.
And what he did for prostate cancer, I think, is huge, huh?
I reflected back on that when I was reading through on the City TV website on the drive in, that I ended up getting my first prostate test after Mark was going through his process, because he came up to me and said, "So have you had a test?" And I went, "No." And I don't know how many men are out there now who you know, went through that same thinking process because he was so public about it and so affirmative about it.
I know you've got a jam-packed schedule, and you beat it down here in record time just so you could share a few memories with us. Well, thank you so much for doing that.
You're very welcome, Bud.
It's always been a pleasure to work with you and to see you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Gord.
Like any devastating loss, it's going to take a while for this one to sink in. We've already heard from many of you by phone and email expressing condolences. We thank you so much. And in the days and weeks ahead, we'll continue to think back about the time Mark Dailey was with us, what he meant to us, and how he'll be remembered everywhere.